A luxurious yacht glides through the misty English Channel, its elite guests hiding secrets beneath their polished smiles. When Sir Reginald Harrow collapses mid-toast, poisoned in plain sight, Hercule Poirot steps aboard to unravel a web of lies. Who slipped digitalis into the dessert? Why did Lady Beatrice taste bitterness but survive? Was it greed, betrayal, or a darker motive? In a claustrophobic world of wealth and deceit, every glance, every gesture holds a clue. Can Poirot's little grey cells uncover the killer before the fog lifts, or will the truth sink with the sapphire yacht? Dive into this gripping Agatha Christie-style mystery, where suspense builds to a shocking, logical reveal. Chapter 1. The Calm Before the Storm. The sapphire yacht glided through the glassy waters of the English Channel, its sleek white hull catching the late afternoon sun. The vessel, a floating palace owned by the wealthy industrialist Sir Reginald Harrow, was a marvel of modern engineering, boasting polished teak decks, crystal chandeliers, and cabins that rivaled the finest London hotels. This weekend, Sir Reginald had invited a select group of guests for a leisurely cruise to the Isle of Wight, a journey meant to dazzle and delight. Yet, beneath the veneer of luxury and civility, an undercurrent of tension rippled through the company. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, stood at the yacht's railing, his eyes scanning the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of salt and the promise of a fine evening. Hastings, with his upright posture and military bearing, felt a pang of unease he could not quite place. Perhaps it was the way Sir Reginald's young wife, Lady Beatrice Harrow, laughed a little too brightly at the jokes of their host's solicitor, Mr. Roland Carver, or perhaps it was the sharp glance exchanged between Miss Eleanor Vance, the American heiress, and Dr. Simon Caldwell, the ship's physician, when they thought no one was watching. The guest list was small but eclectic, a hallmark of Sir Reginald's penchant for mixing business with pleasure. There was Mr. Carver, a wiry man with a sharp nose and sharper wit, who handled Sir Reginald's vast legal affairs. Miss Vance, with her auburn hair and penchant for expensive jewelry, had recently invested heavily in Harrow Industries. Dr. Caldwell, a reserved man in his 40s, was an expert in toxicology and an old friend of Sir Reginald's from their Oxford days. Then there was Mrs. Lavinia Gray, Sir Reginald's widowed sister, whose pinched expression and black mourning attire seemed at odds with the yacht's opulence. Finally, Reginald, a robust man with a booming voice and a penchant for storytelling, held court at the head of the table. Lady Beatrice, resplendent in a sapphire blue gown that matched the yacht's name, played the perfect hostess, though Hastings noted her eyes darted nervously toward her husband whenever he spoke. "Tell me, Captain Hastings," said Sir Reginald, leaning forward with a twinkle in his eye, "have you ever sailed on a finer vessel? The Sapphire is my pride and joy, you know, built to my exact specifications." Hastings smiled politely. "She's a beauty, Sir Reginald, quite unlike anything I've seen, though I confess I'm more accustomed to terra firma." The table chuckled, save for Mrs. Gray, who pursed her lips and toyed with her fork. "Reginald, must you always boast?" she said sharply. "Pride, as the good book says, goeth before a fall." Sir Reginald's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Come now, Lavinia, let us enjoy the evening. Tomorrow we'll dock at Cowes, and I've planned a splendid day ashore." The conversation turned to lighter matters, yacht races, London gossip, and the latest novels. But Hastings couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He noticed Miss Vance's hand tremble slightly as she lifted her glass, and Mr. Carver's habit of glancing at his pocket watch every few minutes. Dr. Caldwell, meanwhile, seemed preoccupied, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the table. As dessert was served, a delicate lemon soufflé, Sir Reginald stood to make a toast. "To friendship, to adventure, and to the sapphire," he declared, raising his glass. The others followed suit, though Mrs. Gray's toast was half-hearted, and Peter Langley's was accompanied by a smirk. It was then that Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "Reginald," she cried, her voice trembling. I feel unwell." Before anyone could react, Sir Reginald clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. He staggered, knocking over his chair, and collapsed onto the polished floor. The room erupted in chaos. Dr. Caldwell rushed to his side, loosening his collar and checking his pulse, but his expression grew grim. "He's dead," Dr. Caldwell announced, his voice steady but low. "I'm afraid there's nothing to be done." A stunned silence fell over the room, broken only by Mrs. Gray's sharp intake of breath. Hastings felt his heart race. Murder, he thought instinctively, though he could not yet say why. The sapphire yacht, so serene only moments ago, now felt like a gilded cage. The following morning, the yacht was anchored off the coast, its engines stilled as the local authorities were summoned. The guests were confined to Poirot, who was staying at a nearby hotel in Southampton. As the sun climbed higher, a small launch approached the yacht. Hercule Poirot stepped aboard, his immaculate black shoes gleaming, his moustache perfectly waxed. Despite the gravity of the situation, he carried an air of calm assurance, his green eyes sharp and observant. "Mon ami, Hastings," Poirot said, clasping his friend's hand. "You have a knack for finding trouble, n'est-ce pas? Tell me everything." Hastings recounted the events of the previous evening, from the dinner to Sir Reginald's sudden collapse. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "A death so sudden, so dramatic," he mused. "It is not natural, I think, but we shall see. First, I must meet these guests of Sir Reginald's. The truth, Hastings, lies in the little details, the glance, the gesture, the word unspoken." As Poirot made his way to the dining saloon, where the guests were now gathered, Hastings felt a familiar thrill. The little Belgian detective, with his meticulous methods and unerring logic, was about to unravel the secrets of the sapphire yacht. But even Hastings could not predict the twists that lay ahead, as years as a Times years by the beak, as the services heard of the Arius play. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The dining saloon of the Sapphire Yacht, so resplendent the previous evening, now bore the sombre air of a courtroom. The crystal chandelier still sparkled, but its light seemed cold, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. The guests, summoned from their cabins, sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of grief, suspicion, and barely concealed fear. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small, neat figure commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. Captain Hastings, seated to his right, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, knowing that Poirot's little grey cells were already at work. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice precise and measured, "a tragedy has occurred aboard this fine vessel. Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of wealth and influence, is dead. The police, they will come, but for now it is Hercule Poirot who must ask the questions. I beg of you to be truthful, for the truth, it is like a diamond, flawless when held to the light." Lady Beatrice Harrow, pale and trembling, clutched a lace handkerchief. Her sapphire blue gown had been replaced by a simple black dress, but her eyes, red-rimmed from weeping, darted nervously about the room. "It was so sudden," she whispered. "One moment he was toasting, and the next—" Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Dr. Simon Caldwell, seated beside her, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It was likely a heart attack,"
he said, his tone professional but tinged with unease. Sir Reginald was not a young man, and he lived a life of excess. Such things can strike without warning. Poirot's eyes narrowed.
Remained polite. A heart attack, you say, doctor? Perhaps, but Poirot, he does not assume. Tell me, when did you last examine Sir Reginald's health? Dr. Caldwell hesitated, his fingers tightening briefly on the arm of his chair. Some months ago, at his estate in Kent. He was robust for his age, though I advised him to moderate his habits, rich foods, cigars, and the like. Moderation, Poirot repeated softly, as if tasting the word. And yet, last night he dined heartily, did he not? The champagne, the soufflé, all most indulgent. The room shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Roland Carver, the solicitor, cleared his throat. With all due respect, Mr. Poirot, what are you implying? Sir Reginald was my client and my friend. If you're suggesting foul play, I must protest. The man had enemies, yes, but murder? Preposterous. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as amusement. Enemies, you say, Monsieur Carver? This is most interesting. Pray, tell me more. Carver flushed, realizing his misstep. I only meant that a man of Sir Reginald's wealth naturally attracts envy. Business rivals, perhaps. But no one on this yacht would have reason to harm him. No one? Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, Sir Reginald's sister, sat ramrod straight, her lips pursed as though biting back words. Miss Eleanor Vance, the American heiress, toyed with a pearl bracelet, her expression unreadable. Peter Langley, the nephew, leaned back in his chair, his boyish features marred by a sullen frown. Let us establish the facts, Poirot continued. Last night, at precisely 7 o'clock, dinner was served. At what time did Sir Reginald collapse? 10 minutes past 8, Hastings offered, consulting his notebook. I glanced at my watch just after the toast. Précisément, Poirot said, nodding. And what occurred in those 10 minutes? Who left the table? Who touched the glasses? A murmur rippled through the group. Lady Beatrice raised her head. I felt ill just before Reginald fell. I thought it was the champagne, perhaps too much. But no one left the table, I'm certain. No one? Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, madame, you dropped your glass. A most curious detail, no? Was it the taste, perhaps? Or something else? Lady Beatrice's cheeks flushed. I don't know. It was all so sudden. Poirot turned to the ship's steward, a wiry young man named Thomas, who stood nervously by the door. Monsieur Thomas, you served the champagne. Sealed? I swear. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Very well. Now, I must see the body. Dr. Caldwell, you will accompany me. The rest of you, remain here. Captain Hastings, you will ensure no one leaves. As Poirot and Dr. Caldwell departed for the cabin where Sir Reginald's body lay, Hastings took his position by the door, his mind racing. The guests exchanged wary glances, their polite facades crumbling under the weight of suspicion. Mrs. Gray muttered something about divine retribution, while Peter Langley lit a cigarette, his hands trembling slightly. Miss Vance whispered to Mr. Carver, who shook his head sharply, as if warning her to be silent. In the small cabin below deck, Poirot examined Sir Reginald's body with meticulous care. The industrialist lay on a narrow bed, his face frozen in a grimace of pain. Dr. Caldwell stood by, his arms crossed, watching Poirot's every move. No external wounds, Poirot murmured, inspecting the hands and neck.
No signs of struggle. But the eyes, doctor, they are dilated, no? And the lips, a faint bluish tinge. Caldwell nodded reluctantly. It could be consistent with poison, though I hesitate to say so without a proper autopsy. Poison, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but firm. I suspected as much. But how was it administered? The champagne, perhaps? Or something more subtle? He turned to the bedside table, where a glass of water and a small vial of pills stood. What are these, doctor? Heart medication, Caldwell replied. Prescribed for Sir Reginald's occasional palpitations. Harmless in proper doses. Poirot pocketed the vial, his expression unreadable. We shall see, doctor, we shall see. Back in the dining saloon, the atmosphere had grown stifling. Hastings noted the time, 11:47 a.m., and jotted it in his notebook. Poirot returned, his demeanor as composed as ever. Mes amis, he said, addressing the group, this is no heart attack. Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered, and the murderer, I assure you, is among us. A collective gasp filled the room. Lady Beatrice stifled a sob, while Mr. Carver's face darkened. This is outrageous, he snapped. You have no proof. Proof? Poirot's smile was almost pitying. Proof, monsieur, is in the details, and Hercule Poirot, he misses nothing. As the guests dispersed to their cabins under Captain Mortimer's watchful eye, Hastings leaned close to Poirot. What did you find, old chap? You've got that look in your eye. Poirot's moustache twitched. A look, Hastings? No. It is the mind that sees. A single glance, a single chill that had settled over the guests. Hercule Poirot, having declared Sir Reginald Harrow's death a murder, had transformed the yacht into a stage for his methodical investigation. Captain Hastings, ever at his friend's side, marvelled at how Poirot's presence shifted the atmosphere. Where there had been shock and grief, there was now a palpable tension, as if each guest felt the weight of those sharp green eyes. Poirot had requested a private cabin to serve as his temporary headquarters, and Captain Mortimer, the yacht's stoic commander, had obliged, providing a small but elegant study adjacent to the dining saloon. The room was lined with bookshelves and furnished with a polished oak desk, where Poirot now sat, his notebook open and his pen poised. Hastings stood by the porthole, watching the distant shore of the Isle of Wight, where the police launch was expected to arrive by noon. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice cutting through Hastings' reverie. You are distracted. Tell me what you make of our little circle of suspects. Hastings turned, frowning. Well, it's a rum lot, isn't it? Lady Beatrice seems genuinely distraught, but there's something off about her. That business with dropping her glass, for instance. And Carver, the solicitor, he's awfully defensive. Then there's young Langley, who stands to inherit a fortune. Motive enough, I'd say. Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. Always so quick to judge, Hastings. The heart, it speaks loudly, but the mind must listen carefully. Motive, oui, but opportunity, method, these are the pillars of a crime. And we must not forget the others, Miss Vance, Mrs. Gray, Dr. Caldwell. Each has a story, and each story has a crack. Before Hastings could respond, there was a knock at the door. Captain Mortimer entered, his weathered face grim. Mr. Poirot, the police launch has been delayed by fog. They won't reach us until late afternoon, at the earliest. I've instructed the crew to keep the guests confined to their cabins, as you requested. Merci, Captain, Poirot replied, his tone polite but firm. And the crew? They are accounted for? Every man, sir. I've checked their logs and alibis myself. They were all on duty during the dinner. None had access to the dining saloon except Thomas, the steward, and he swears he only handled the champagne under my supervision. Poirot nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Very well. I will begin my interviews. Send in Lady Beatrice first, if you please. As Mortimer departed, Hastings raised an eyebrow. Starting with the widow. Bold move, Poirot.
Her voice trembling. This is a nightmare. Reginald was everything to me. Who could do such a thing? Poirot's eyes softened, but his gaze remained piercing. Madame, my condolences. But tell me, if you will, about last night. You felt unwell, you said? Describe this feeling, s'il vous plaît. Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. It was a dizziness, a burning in my throat. I thought perhaps the champagne was too strong, or I'd eaten something that disagreed with me. Then Reginald collapsed and I forgot my own discomfort. And the glass you dropped? Poirot pressed gently. It was during the toast, oui? Did you taste the champagne before you dropped it? Yes, she admitted, her cheeks flushing. Just a sip. It tasted bitter, perhaps. I don't know. It all happened so quickly. Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. And your husband, madame? He was in good spirits? No threats, no enemies mentioned in recent days? Lady Beatrice shook her head. Reginald was always so confident, so larger than life. He had rivals, of course, businessmen who envied his success, but he never spoke of anyone wishing him harm. Not to me. Merci, madame, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As she left, he turned to Hastings. A bitter taste, Hastings, most interesting. And her grief, it is real, I think, but there is something she does not say. Next, Poirot summoned Mr. Roland Carver. The solicitor entered with a brisk air, his sharp features set in a scowl. Mr. Poirot, I must protest this inquisition. The police will handle this matter when they arrive. Your interference is unwarranted. Poirot's smile was disarming. Monsieur Carver, I seek only the truth. You were Sir Reginald's solicitor, oui? You knew his affairs intimately. Tell me, was his fortune secure, or were there complications? Carver's eyes narrowed. Sir Reginald's finances were robust. Harrow Industries is a titan in steel and shipping. There were no complications, as you put it. And his will? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively casual. Who benefits from his death? Carver stiffened. That is confidential, Mr. Poirot. But I assure you, everything was in order. Lady Beatrice naturally is well provided for, as is Peter Langley, his nephew. Poirot made another note. And you, monsieur, you have no stake in this fortune? Carver's face reddened. I am a professional, sir. I served Sir Reginald loyally for 15 years. To suggest otherwise is an insult. Pardonnez-moi, Poirot said smoothly. I suggest nothing. I observe. You may go. As Carver stormed out, Hastings chuckled. You rattled him, Poirot. He's hiding something, mark my words. Perhaps, Poirot. Morning. Miss Eleanor Vance spoke with a cool detachment, admitting to a recent business deal with Sir Reginald, but denying any personal animosity. Mrs. Lavinia Gray was terse, her bitterness toward her brother evident in every word. Reginald was reckless, she snapped. He flaunted his wealth, his young wife. This is God's judgment. Peter Langley, meanwhile, was evasive, claiming to have spent the evening joking with his uncle, though his alibi for the moments before the toast was vague. Dr. Simon Caldwell was the last to be interviewed. He entered with a weary air, his medical bag clutched tightly. Mr. Poirot, I've told you what I know. Sir Reginald's death was sudden, likely poison. I can't say more without a proper analysis. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Doctor, You are a man of science. Tell me, could a poison be administered so quickly, so discreetly, in a room full of people? Caldwell hesitated. It's possible. A fast-acting toxin slipped into a drink or food. But it would require precision and opportunity. Précisément, Poirot said, rising. And opportunity, Doctor, is what we shall now seek. As the clock struck noon, Poirot and Hastings returned to the dining saloon, where the guests awaited. The fog still clung to the horizon, delaying the police. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on the empty chair where Sir Reginald had sat. "Mes amis," he said, "the truth is like the sea. It hides much beneath its surface. But Hercule Poirot, he dives deep." Hastings felt a shiver. The little Belgian was in his element, and the net was tightening around the murderer aboard the Sapphire yacht. Chapter 4. The Questions Deepen. The Sapphire yacht's dining saloon, though bathed in the pale light of midday, seemed to shrink under the weight of Hercule Poirot's scrutiny. The guests, now restless after hours of confinement, shifted in their seats as Poirot paced slowly before them, his polished shoes clicking softly on the teak floor. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook open, jotting down every detail as Poirot began his second round of inquiries. The little Belgian's questions, though delivered with impeccable courtesy, were like darts, each aimed to pierce the carefully constructed facades of the suspects. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "we have established that Sir Reginald Harrow was poisoned. The method, it is subtle, the motive, it is hidden, but the truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Let us reconstruct the evening, moment by moment, and see where the shadows fall." He turned to Thomas, the steward, who stood nervously by the serving table, his hands clasped tightly. "Their plates." Sir Reginald was at the head of the table, Lady Beatrice's to his right, and so on. I poured from a single bottle opened by Captain Mortimer.
"And you saw no one touch the glasses before the toast?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing.
"No, sir,"
Thomas replied, though his voice wavered slightly.
"Everyone was seated, talking. I was busy clearing the dessert plates."
Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching.
"Very well. And the dessert? The lemon soufflé? It was served to all? Oui?" "Yes, sir,"
Thomas confirmed.
"Everyone had a portion except Mrs. Gray, who said she doesn't care for sweets."
Mrs. Lavinia Gray, seated stiffly in her black morning dress, bristled. "I fail to see how my dietary preferences are relevant, Mr. Poirot. My brother was poisoned, you say. Surely you don't suspect the soufflé?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic.
"Madame, in a case such as this, everything is relevant. The soufflé, the champagne, the glances exchanged across the table, all are pieces of the puzzle."
He turned to Lady Beatrice, whose pale face seemed to grow paler still.
"Madame, you mentioned a bitter taste in your champagne. Did anyone else remark on the taste of their drink?"
Lady Beatrice hesitated, her eyes darting to the others. I don't recall anyone saying so, but I was so shaken I may not have noticed." Miss Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair catching the light, spoke up, her voice cool and measured. "My champagne was perfectly fine, Mr. Poirot. If there was something wrong with Beatrice's, perhaps it was a dirty glass."
"A dirty glass?" Poirot repeated, raising an eyebrow. "An interesting theory, mademoiselle. But a poison, it does not cling to a glass by accident. No, it is placed with intent."
Mr. Roland Carver, the solicitor, shifted uncomfortably.
"This is all speculation, Mr. Poirot. You've no evidence of poison yet. For all we know, Sir Reginald's heart gave out, as Dr. Caldwell suggested."
Dr. Simon Caldwell nodded, though his expression was guarded.
"I've said it's possible, Mr. Carver. but without an autopsy I can't confirm the cause. Mr. Poirot's theory of poison is plausible.
Plausible, Peter Langley, the nephew, scoffed, lighting another cigarette.
This is absurd. My uncle was healthy as a horse. If someone poisoned him, they'd have needed a damn good reason and a way to do it without being seen.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Monsieur Langley. The reason and the method, these are what we seek. Tell me, where were you at 8:05 p.m. just before the toast? Langley exhaled a plume of smoke, his boyish charm replaced by a defensive edge.
At the table, like everyone else. I was joking with Uncle Reginald about his yacht races. Ask anyone. Indeed, I shall. Pearl bracelet. I was seated between Dr. Caldwell and Mr. Carver. We were discussing business matters. I never left my seat. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, as if weighing her words. Then he turned to Captain Mortimer, who had re-entered the room. Captain, this ship's log, may I see it? And the layout of the dining saloon, if you please. Mortimer produced a neatly drawn map of the table, showing the positions of each guest. Sir Reginald at the head, Lady Beatrice to his right, Peter Langley to his left, followed by Miss Vance, Dr. Caldwell, Mr. Carver, and Mrs. Gray, in a clockwise arrangement. Poirot studied it intently, his finger tracing the lines. The glasses, they were placed thus, oui? And the dessert plates, they were cleared just before the toast? Yes, sir, Thomas interjected. I cleared the plates at about 8 p.m., then poured the champagne. Poirot's eyes flickered with sudden interest. And in that moment, Monsieur Thomas, when you were clearing the plates, was there a distraction, a loud noise, perhaps, or a spilled drink? Thomas frowned, thinking. Well, now that you mention it, Miss Vance dropped her fork. It clattered on the floor, and I bent to pick it up. Everyone was laughing. It was a small thing, really. Miss Vance flushed. It was an accident, Mr. Poirot. My hand slipped. Of course, Poirot said smoothly. Accidents, they happen. But they also provide opportunities. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, noted the time, 1:32 p.m. The fog still clung to the horizon, delaying the police, and the tension aboard the yacht was palpable. Poirot dismissed the guests, instructing them to remain available. As they filed out, he turned to Hastings, his expression grave. Mon ami, the fork, the glass, the bitter taste, these are not accidents. They are threads in a tapestry, and the pattern is beginning to emerge. Hastings frowned. You think the poison was in the champagne, then? But how could it be with everyone drinking from the same bottle? Poirot tapped his temple. The little grey cells, Hastings, they tell me it is not so simple. The champagne, it is the obvious choice, but the obvious is rarely the truth. We must look closer, at the moments when eyes were turned away, at the hands that moved unseen. He rose, adjusting his tie with precision. Come, let us examine the dining saloon once more. The scene of the crime, it holds secrets yet. As they stepped into the now empty saloon, Poirot's gaze swept the table, lingering on the spot where Sir Reginald's glass had stood. He knelt, inspecting the floor, then straightened with a small, satisfied nod. Oui, Hastings, he murmured. Murder aboard the Sapphire yacht would soon have nowhere to hide. The Sapphire yacht, anchored in the misty embrace of the English Channel, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot continued his relentless pursuit of the truth. The dining saloon, now cleared of guests, was a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded the previous evening. Captain Hastings stood by the polished mahogany table, watching as Poirot paced slowly, his eyes darting from the chandelier to the neatly arranged chairs. The fog outside had thickened, delaying the police launch further, and the atmosphere aboard was one of mounting unease. "Mon ami," Poirot said, pausing to adjust a slightly crooked dessert spoon. "The mind of the murderer is like a stage play, full of misdirection. The obvious suspect, the obvious clue, these are the red herrings that distract the unwary. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily fooled." Hastings frowned, his notebook open. "You mean someone's trying to lead us astray? But who? Lady Beatrice, with her fainting spell? Or young Langley, with his inheritance looming?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. Let us consider the evidence. The police, when they arrive, will seize upon the simplest explanation. We must be more discerning." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Mortimer, his face etched with worry. "Mr. Poirot, there's been a development. One of the crew found something in the galley, something you should see." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Lead the way, Captain." The galley, a compact space below deck, was a marvel of efficiency, with gleaming copper pots and a faint aroma of herbs. A young crewman, Jenkins, stood nervously by a counter, holding a small glass vial. "I found this, sir, tucked behind a sack of flour. It wasn't there when we cleaned last night, I'd swear it." Poirot took the vial, holding it to the light. It was empty, but a faint residue clung to the inner surface, and a small label bore the word Digitalis. He turned to Dr. Simon Caldwell, who had been summoned to join them. "Doctor, this is familiar to you, no? Digitalis, a heart medication, but in excess, a poison." Caldwell's face tightened. "Yes, it's used to treat heart conditions, but an overdose can cause cardiac arrest. It's fast-acting, especially if ingested. But this vial, it's not from my medical kit. I keep strict inventory." Poirot nodded, pocketing the vial. "Merci, doctor. And you, Jenkins, you are certain this was not here before dinner?" "Certain, sir," Jenkins replied, his voice firm. "I checked the galley myself at 6 o'clock. As they returned to the study, Hastings whispered, "This points to Caldwell, doesn't it? He's the dog placed where it will be found." A clumsy attempt to cast suspicion. No, the true murderer is more subtle. Back in the study, Poirot spread out the dining saloon's seating plan, his finger tracing the positions. "Let us review the alibis. At 8 p.m., Thomas clears the dessert plates. Miss Vance drops her fork, a distraction, perhaps. At 8:05, the champagne is poured. At 8:10, Sir Reginald collapses. The poison, it must act quickly. Digitalis, it fits. But how was it delivered?" Hastings rubbed his chin. "The champagne's the obvious choice, but everyone drank from the same bottle. Could it have been in Sir Reginald's glass alone? Possible, Poirot mused, but risky. The glasses, they are in plain view. No, I think the poison was administered earlier, perhaps disguised in something only Sir Reginald consumed." Their discussion was cut short by a commotion in the corridor. Mr. Roland Carver burst into the study, his face flushed with indignation. "Mr. Poirot, this is intolerable. I've just learned from the crew that Peter Langley was seen near the galley last night, after dinner. If anyone's to blame, it's that grasping nephew." Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm. "Monsieur Carver, accusations are easy. Evidence is harder. Who saw Monsieur Langley?" "One of the deckhands," Carver replied, his voice sharp. "He says Peter was lurking near the galley stairs around 9 p.m., looking furtive." Poirot made a note. "Very well. I will speak with Monsieur Langley. And you, Monsieur Carver, where were you at 9 p.m.? Carver blinked, caught off guard. "In my cabin, reviewing documents. I had no reason to wander the ship." "Alone?" Poirot pressed, his tone deceptively mild. "Yes, alone," Carver snapped. "I'm not the one sneaking about." Poirot dismissed him with a nod, then turned to Hastings. "The net tightens, mon ami. Langley, he is a convenient target, no? But convenience, it is the hallmark of a red herring. Summoned to the study, Peter Langley entered with a defiant air, his cigarette dangling from his lips. "What's this nonsense about me and the galley? I was in my cabin after dinner, smoking and reading. That deckhand's mistaken." Poirot studied him, his eyes piercing. "Monsieur Langley, you stand to inherit a fortune. This gives you motive, oui? And now, a witness places you near the galley, where a vial of poison is found. What do you say?" Langley's jaw tightened. "I say it's rot. I didn't go near the galley, and I didn't need to kill my uncle. He was grooming me to take over Harrow Industries. Why would I risk that?" "Why, indeed," Poirot murmured, "and yet you were seen. Perhaps you were curious, or perhaps someone wishes us enigmatic."
Hastings, the guilty, they do not protest so loudly. The vial, the sighting, these are too neat, too perfect. No, we must look beyond the obvious. The true clue, it lies in the details we have overlooked. He rose, adjusting his tie. "Come, let us return to the dining saloon. I wish to examine the table once more. The fork, the glass, the soufflé. Something there speaks to Poirot." As they stepped into the saloon, the clock struck 3 p.m. The fog showed no sign of lifting, and the guests' nerves were fraying. Poirot knelt by the table, his fingers brushing the spot where Miss Vance's fork had fallen. "A distraction," he murmured. "But for whom? And why?" Hastings watched, his mind racing. The red herrings were piling up, but Poirot's focus was unshakable. The truth, Hastings knew, was closer than ever, and yet still maddeningly out of reach. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The sapphire yacht, still shrouded in the dense fog of the English Channel, seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot continued his meticulous investigation. The dining saloon, now a familiar stage for his inquiries, was silent save for the faint creak of the ship's timbers and the distant lapping of waves. Captain Hastings stood by the porthole, his notebook filled with scribbled observations, watching as Poirot examined the table with the intensity of an artist studying a canvas. The little Belgian's green eyes gleamed with a quiet excitement, as if he had glimpsed a thread in the intricate tapestry of the crime. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. "The truth, it hides in the smallest details. The gesture overlooked, the word misspoken, the object misplaced. We have been distracted by the vial, the alibis, the loud protests. But now, we must look closer." Hastings nodded, though he felt a twinge of frustration. "You keep saying that, Poirot, but what are we looking for? The champagne? The fork? The soufflé?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "All of these, Hastings, and none of them. The clue, it is not in the object itself, but in the moment it was used. Let us reconstruct the dinner once more." He moved to the head of the table, where Sir Reginald had sat, and gestured to the spot where Lady Beatrice's glass had shattered. At 8 p.m., Thomas clears the dessert plates. Miss Vance drops her fork, a distraction, oui? At 8:05, the champagne is poured. At 8:10, Sir Reginald collapses, and Lady Beatrice panic. "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "But why was the glass not full? She took only a sip," she said. "Yet the pool was too small for a nearly full glass. This suggests something was added to her drink or taken away."
Hastings' eyes widened. You think her glass was tampered with, but she didn't collapse. Sir Reginald did. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice sharp. And that, mon ami, is the contradiction. Why does Lady Beatrice taste bitterness and feel ill, yet survive, while Sir Reginald dies? The poison, it was meant for him, but the method, it is not what we assume. Poirot turned to the serving table, where the champagne bottle had stood. He examined the spot, then moved to the sideboard, where a silver tray held a decanter of water and a few spare glasses. His fingers paused on a small, ornate sugar bowl, its lid slightly askew. "This," he said softly, "is most interesting." He lifted the lid, revealing a fine white powder inside, not sugar, but something finer, almost crystalline. "Hastings, fetch Dr. Caldwell at once." Moments later, Dr. Simon Caldwell entered, his medical bag in hand. He looked weary, his eyes shadowed with strain. "Mr. Poirot, what now? I've told you all I know." Poirot held up the sugar bowl. "Doctor, this powder, it is not sugar, I think. Can you identify it?" Caldwell peered into the bowl, his brow furrowing. He took a pinch, rubbing it between his fingers, then sniffed cautiously. "It could be digitalis, ground to a powder, but I'd need to test it properly. Where did you find this?" "In plain sight," Poirot replied, "yet hidden by its ordinariness. Tell me, doctor, who had access to this sideboard during dinner?" Caldwell hesitated. "The steward, Thomas, was in and out, serving. The guests were at the table, but anyone could have approached the sideboard earlier, before we sat down. It's near the entrance to the saloon." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "Merci, doctor. You may go." As Caldwell left, Hastings whispered, "Digitalis in the sugar bowl. But who used sugar? Sir Reginald took his coffee black, didn't he?" "Oui," Poirot said, "but not everyone did. Lady Beatrice, she took sugar in her coffee, did she not? And Miss Vance, I observed, stirred her coffee with care. The sugar bowl, it is a perfect vehicle for poison, discreet, unsuspected." Hastings' mind raced. So the poison was meant for Lady Beatrice, not Sir Reginald. But how did it end up killing him?
Brought it to the table after the soufflé, oui? Hastings checked his notes. Yes, at about 8:02 p.m., just before the champagne was poured. Lady Beatrice took sugar, and so did Miss Vance. Mrs. Gray refused coffee entirely. Poirot's fingers drummed on the table. "And Sir Reginald? Did he take coffee?" Hastings shook his head. "I don't recall him drinking coffee. He was focused on the wine and the toast." "Exactement," Poirot said, his voice low. "Yet the poison, it reached him. The sugar bowl, it is a piece of the puzzle, but the picture is not complete. We must look to the human element, the glance, the hesitation, the lie." He turned to Hastings, his expression grave. "Summon Miss Vance. Her fork, her coffee, her business with Sir Reginald, these are threads that must be unravelled." Miss Eleanor Vance entered the study moments later, her auburn hair pinned neatly, her demeanour cool but wary. "Mr. Poirot, this is becoming tiresome. I've answered your questions. What more do you want?" Poirot's smile was disarming. "Mademoiselle, I seek only clarity. Last night you dropped your fork, a small distraction. And you took sugar in your coffee, oui? Tell me, did you notice anything unusual about the sugar?" Miss Vance's fingers tightened on her bracelet. "The sugar? No, it was ordinary. I only took a spoonful. Why do you ask?" Poirot leaned forward,
his eyes piercing. "Because, mademoiselle, the sugar bowl contained not sugar but poison, and yet you are alive. This is most curious, no?" Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "Poison? That's absurd. I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. Our business was profitable, nothing more." "Profit," Poirot repeated softly. "A powerful motive, mademoiselle. But for now, you may go." As she left, Hastings whispered, "She's nervous, Poirot. That business deal, do you think it's connected?" Poirot nodded. "Perhaps. But the clue, Hastings, lies not in what she says, but in what she does not. The sugar bowl, the fork, the bitter taste, these are the whispers of the truth, and soon they will shout." The clock struck 4:15 p.m., and the fog showed no sign of lifting. The sapphire yacht remained a gilded cage, and Poirot's net was tightening around the murderer. More lies surface. The fog enveloping the sapphire yacht seemed to seep into the very air of the dining saloon, where Hercule Poirot's investigation had cast a pall over the guests. The afternoon light, dimmed by the mist, lent an eerie glow to the polished surfaces, and the tension among the suspects was as taut as a violin string. Captain Hastings, stationed near the door with his ever-present, said, pausing to adjust his tie with precision, "The lies. They are like shadows, cast by the truth, but distorted. We have found the poison, but the motives, they remain hidden. Now, we must dig deeper into the hearts of those aboard this yacht." Hastings nodded, though his mind churned with questions. "The sugar bowl, Poirot. It points to Lady Beatrice or Miss Vance, doesn't it? They both took sugar. But how did the poison reach Sir Reginald?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, Hastings, is the puzzle. The sugar bowl. It is a clever misdirection, but not the whole story. We must uncover the secrets these people guard, the affairs, the grudges, the betrayals." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. Captain Mortimer entered, his face grim. "Mr. Poirot, there's been an altercation. Mrs. Gray and Mr. Carver. They're in the lounge, arguing loudly. I thought you should know." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most interesting. Let us observe this disagreement." The lounge, a plush room with velvet armchairs and a grand piano, was a stark contrast to the heated exchange within. Mrs. Lavinia Gray stood rigid, her black mourning dress making her appear like a spectre of judgment, while Mr. Roland Carver, his face flushed, gestured angrily. "You dare accuse me, Lavinia?" Carver snapped. "I served your brother faithfully. If anyone had reason to resent him, it was you, always harping on his so-called sins." Mrs. Gray's eyes flashed. "Reginald was a fool, chasing wealth and that woman. But I did not kill him, Roland. Can you say the same with your hands in his finances?" Poirot stepped forward, his presence silencing them. "Mesdames et messieurs, such passion is revealing. Pray, enlighten me. What is the cause of this dispute?" Mrs. Gray turned, her lips pursed. "Mr. Poirot, I merely suggested that Mr. Carver's loyalty to my brother was questionable. Reginald told me, only last week, that he suspected discrepancies in his accounts. He planned to confront Roland." Carver's face darkened. "That's a lie. Sir Reginald trusted me implicitly. I handled millions for him, every penny accounted for. You're trying to deflect suspicion, Lavinia, because you hated him." Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. Monsieur Carver, these discrepancies, Did Sir Reginald mention them to you? Carver hesitated, his jaw tightening. He asked questions about certain investments, yes, but it was routine. Nothing was amiss. Poirot, the surface.
Determined to probe further, Poirot summoned Peter Langley to the study. The young man entered with a sullen air, his cigarette smoke curling in the air. "What now, Mr. Poirot? I've told you I was in my cabin after dinner." Poirot studied him, his eyes piercing.
Monsieur Langley, you are Sir Reginald's heir, oui? But your uncle, he was grooming you for his business. Tell me, were you content to wait for your inheritance?
Langley's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying? I admired Uncle Reginald. He promised me a role in Harrow Industries. Why would I jeopardize that?"
Perhaps, Poirot said softly, because promises are not guarantees. Did Sir Reginald ever speak of changing his will?
Langley's hand trembled slightly, the cigarette ash falling to the floor. "He mentioned it once, in passing. Said he was reconsidering things, now that he had Beatrice. But it was just talk." Poirot made a note.
And your relationship with Lady Beatrice, it is amicable?
Langley smirked, a bitter edge to his expression. "She's charming, isn't she? But she's no fool. She knew how to keep Uncle Reginald wrapped around her finger." As Langley left, Poirot turned to Hastings.
The nephew, he is bitter, no? And bitterness, it can lead to desperate acts.
Next, Poirot called Miss Eleanor Vance. She entered with her usual composure, though her fingers toyed nervously with her pearl bracelet.
Mr. Poirot, I hope this won't take long. I've told you everything.
Poirot's smile was disarming.
Mademoiselle, let us speak of your business with Sir Reginald. A significant investment, oui? But was it purely business? Or was there a personal connection?
Miss Vance's cheeks flushed.
Personal? That's absurd. Sir Reginald was a shrewd partner, nothing more. My investment was sound. Harrow Industries is a gold mine. And yet,
Poirot pressed,
you dropped your fork at a critical moment. A distraction, perhaps, to cover another act?
Her eyes widened, but she recovered quickly.
I told you it was an accident. You're grasping at straws, Mr. Poirot.
As she left, Hastings whispered,
She's hiding something, Poirot. That business deal, could it have gone sour? Perhaps,
Poirot mused.
But it is the personal, not the professional, that drives murder. The fork, the sugar, the glance, these are the keys.
The clock struck 5:30 p.m., and the fog remained impenetrable. Poirot returned to the dining saloon, his gaze fixed on the sideboard where the sugar bowl had stood.
Hastings,
he said,
we are close to a revelation. The lies, they pile up, but the truth
was surfacing. And Poirot's relentless logic was peeling back the layers of deceit. The murderer, he knew, was beginning to feel the pressure. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The sapphire yacht, adrift in the fog's unyielding grip, seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken truths. The dining saloon, once a stage for elegance and laughter, now felt like a courtroom where Hercule Poirot held sway. The guests, confined to the ship's opulent but claustrophobic spaces, were fraying under the strain of suspicion. Captain Hastings, stationed near the saloon's entrance, felt the tension as keenly as a storm brewing on the horizon. His notebook, now filled with pages of meticulous notes, lay open in his hand as he watched Poirot prepare for what he sensed was a pivotal moment. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. "We approach a turning point. The lies, they are heavy, and the guilty, they cannot bear the weight forever. We must apply pressure, gently but firmly,
until the truth breaks free. Hastings nodded, his pulse quickening. You're planning something, aren't you? A confrontation, Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not a confrontation, Hastings, a revelation. The human heart, it betrays itself in moments of weakness. We shall see who falters. The guests were summoned to the lounge, where the velvet armchairs and grand piano stood in stark contrast to the strained expressions of those gathered. Lady Beatrice sat pale and fragile, her handkerchief clutched tightly. Mr. Roland Carver's sharp features were set in a scowl, while Miss Eleanor Vance maintained her cool demeanour, though her fingers toyed nervously with her pearl bracelet. Mrs. Lavinia Gray's lips were pursed, her black dress a silent rebuke. Peter Langley leaned against the piano, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his eyes defiant. Dr. Simon Caldwell stood apart, his medical bag at his feet, his expression unreadable. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "A crime has been committed aboard this yacht. A crime most foul. Sir Reginald Harrow was poisoned, and the poison, it was no accident. The digitalis, found in the sugar bowl, points to a deliberate act. But the question remains, who had the motive, the means, and the moment to strike?" A murmur rippled through the group. Lady Beatrice stifled a sob, while Carver snapped, "This is speculation, Mr. Poirot. You've no proof." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Proof, Monsieur Carver, is in the details. Let us consider the sugar bowl. It was passed among you during coffee, oui? Lady Beatrice, you took sugar. Miss Vance, you also. Yet Sir Reginald, he did not take coffee. So how did the poison reach—"
Eyes were unrelenting. "Oui, madame. You survived. And this is most curious. The bitter taste you described, the dizziness. It suggests you too were poisoned, but in a smaller dose. Why?" Miss Vance's composure faltered, her hand pausing on her bracelet. "Are you suggesting someone tried to kill Beatrice as well? That's absurd." "Is it?" Poirot turned to her, his tone sharp. "Mademoiselle, your fork fell at a critical moment, a distraction, perhaps, to allow a sleight of hand. And you too took sugar, yet you show no signs of illness. Why is that?" Miss Vance's cheeks flushed. "I told you my coffee was fine. I don't know what you're implying." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I imply nothing, mademoiselle. I observe. And I observe that someone in this room has a secret that drove them to murder." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Lavinia Gray stood, her voice trembling with emotion. "Enough of this charade," she cried. "I can't bear it any longer. Reginald was my brother, and I loved him despite his flaws. But he was blind to the greed and betrayal around him." All eyes turned to her. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Madame Gray, what do you know? Speak, I implore you." Tears welled in her eyes, a rare crack in her stoic facade. I saw something last night, before dinner, in the corridor near the galley. I saw Roland Carver speaking with Eleanor Vance. They were whispering, and he handed her something, a small packet. I thought nothing of it then, but now I fear it was the poison." Carver leaped to his feet, his face livid. "That's a lie! Lavinia, you spiteful old hag! I never gave Eleanor anything!" Miss Vance's face drained of colour. "She's mistaken, Mr. Poirot. I was with Roland, yes, discussing business, but there was no packet. She's confused." Poirot's eyes darted between them, his mind racing. "A packet, Madame Gray. Describe it, s'il vous plaît." Mrs. Gray hesitated, her hands trembling. "It was small, white, like a folded piece of paper. I couldn't see clearly, it was only a moment as I passed by."
Poirot nodded, making a mental note. Merci, madame. Your candor is most valuable, and you, Monsieur Carver, Mademoiselle Vance, perhaps you wish to clarify this misunderstanding. Carver's voice was tight with anger. There's nothing to clarify. Lavinia's imagining things, or worse, trying to frame us. Miss Vance nodded, her voice steady but strained. I swear, Mr. Poirot, it's as Roland says. We discussed a contract, nothing more. Poirot's gaze.
Cabin. Whoever saw me is lying, and frankly, I'm tired of these accusations. Dr. Caldwell cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Poirot, this is getting out of hand. Mrs. Gray is distraught and her memory may be faulty. Let's wait for the police to conduct a proper investigation. Poirot's smile was almost pitying. The police, they will come, Doctor. But the truth, it does not wait. Madame Gray has given us a spark, and now the fire begins to burn. As the guests were dismissed, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion, Hastings leaned close to Poirot. Good Lord, Poirot. Mrs. Gray's accusation. It's explosive. Do you believe her about Carver and Vance? Poirot's expression was grave. She speaks the truth as she sees it, Hastings. But the truth is like a mirror. It reflects, but it can distort. The packet, it is a clue, but we must verify. The emotional break, it reveals much, but not all. The clock struck 6:45 p.m., and the fog outside showed no sign of lifting. Poirot returned to his study, his mind a whirl of connections, the sugar bowl, the packet, the bitter taste. Hastings followed, sensing that the investigation was nearing a critical juncture. The lies were crumbling, and the murderer's mask was slipping. Chapter 9. The Trap. The sapphire yacht, still cloaked in the relentless fog, felt like a world unto itself, its opulent interiors now a stage for Hercule Poirot's calculated gambit. The lounge, with its velvet armchairs and gleaming piano, had become a crucible where the guests' nerves were tested to their limits. Captain Hastings, standing by the entrance with his notebook, sensed the air crackling with anticipation. Poirot, ever the maestro, was about to orchestrate a scene designed to flush out the murderer. Mon ami, Poirot murmured to Hastings, his voice low as they prepared to summon the guests. The trap, it is set with care. The guilty, they will betray themselves, not with words, but with the language of the heart. Watch their eyes, their hands, their silences. Hastings nodded, his pulse quickening. You're going to confront them all together, aren't you? Stow the pot and see who cracks. Poirot's mustache twitched. Précisément. The pressure. It reveals the truth. We have the sugar bowl, the packet, the bitter taste, pieces of the puzzle. Now, we must make them fit. The guests filed into the lounge, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Beatrice, pale and fragile, clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Mr. Roland Carver's sharp features were set in a defensive scowl, while Miss Eleanor Vance maintained her cool exterior, though her gaze guarded. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame commanding attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and resonant. We are close to the truth. Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered, poisoned with digitalis, and the murderer is among us. Tonight, we will uncover the how and the why. A murmur of protest rose, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Let us review the facts. At 8 p.m., the dessert plates are cleared. Miss Vance drops her fork, a distraction perhaps. At 8:02, the sugar bowl, laced with digitalis, is passed for coffee. Lady Beatrice and Miss Vance take sugar, yet only Lady Beatrice feels ill. At 8:05, the champagne is poured,
and at 8:10 Sir Reginald collapses. A bitter taste, Madame Beatrice says, in her champagne. Yet the bottle was shared, the glasses untouched until the toast. How, then, did the poison reach Sir Reginald? Carver's voice was sharp. This is nonsense, Poirot. You're spinning theories with no proof. The police will sort this out. Poirot's smile was disarming. The police. They will come, Monsieur Carver, but Poirot? He does not wait. Consider this. A packet, seen by Madame Gray, passed from you to Mademoiselle Vance before dinner. A packet, perhaps, containing digitalis? Carver's face reddened. I told you that's a lie. Lavinia's mistaken. Miss Vance's composure wavered, her voice tight. I received no packet, Mr. Poirot. Mrs. Gray is confused, or worse, malicious. Mrs. Gray's eyes flashed. I know what I saw, Eleanor. You and Roland, conspiring in the corridor. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. And yet, the sugar bowl tells a different story. It was on the sideboard, accessible to all before dinner. But during the meal, it was passed. By whom? Monsieur Thomas, the steward? You brought the bowl to the table, oui? Thomas, standing nervously by the door, nodded. Yes, sir. I placed it near Lady Beatrice, as she asked for sugar first. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice, his eyes gentle but probing. Madame, you took sugar and you felt ill, yet you survived. Why? Lady Beatrice's hands trembled, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Mr. Poirot. I only took a spoonful. I thought, perhaps the coffee was too strong. Poirot nodded, then turned to Peter Langley. Monsieur Langley, you were seen near the galley after dinner, where a vial of digitalis was found. You stand to inherit a fortune. A strong motive, no? Langley's cigarette fell to the floor, his face pale. I wasn't in the galley. That deckhand's lying, I tell you. And yes, I'm the heir, but I didn't need to kill him. He was going to give me everything. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Digitalis, it is fast-acting, oui? Could it be administered in a way that affects one person and not another, even in the same drink? Caldwell hesitated, his fingers tightening on his bag. It's possible, if the dose was precise and targeted. But it would require skill and opportunity. Opportunity, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but commanding. And who had such opportunity? Let us consider the moments before the toast. The table was busy, the fork fell, the sugar bowl was passed, a moment of chaos, perfect for a sleight of hand. He paused, his gaze locking onto Miss Vance. Mademoiselle, you sat beside Sir Reginald. Your fork fell, drawing eyes away. Did you, perhaps, use that moment to act? Miss Vance's face drained of color. That's outrageous! I dropped my fork by accident. I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. Poirot's smile was almost pitying. No reason, mademoiselle? Yet your investment in Harrow Industries was substantial. Did Sir Reginald threaten to withdraw his support, perhaps? Her voice shook. Our deal was sound. You're twisting things. Poirot stepped closer to the group, his voice rising. Someone in this room poisoned Sir Reginald. The sugar bowl, the packet, the bitter taste. These are not accidents. They are the work of a mind both cunning and desperate. I give you this chance. Confess now, or the truth will be revealed, and it will not be kind. The room was deathly silent, the guests frozen, their eyes darting to one another. Then, to everyone's shock, Lady Beatrice stood, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "Stop it!" she cried, her voice breaking. "I can't bear this. I know something, Mr. Poirot. I didn't want to say, but Reginald was afraid. He told me, the day before we sailed, that someone was threatening him. He wouldn't say who, but he was scared." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. "Madam, why did you not speak of this before?" Tears streamed down her face. "Because I was afraid they'd come for me next." The room erupted in murmurs, accusations flying. Carver pointed at Langley. Mrs. Gray glared at Miss Vance, and Caldwell's face remained impassive. Poirot raised his hands, restoring order. "Enough! The trap it has sprung. The truth it is close. Return to your cabins and reflect on what has been said. As the guests dispersed, Hastings whispered, "Good heavens, Poirot! Lady Beatrice's confession, it changes everything. A threat against Sir Reginald?" Poirot's expression was grave. "Oui, Hastings, but it is not the whole truth. The threat, it is real, but her fear, it hides something more. The trap has worked, mon ami. Now we wait for the guilty to make their next move." The clock struck 8 p.m., the fog unyielding. The sapphire yacht was a powder keg, and Poirot's words had lit the fuse. English Channel seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot prepared to unveil the truth. The lounge, with its plush velvet armchairs and gleaming piano, was charged with an electric tension. The guests, summoned once more, sat in a semicircle, their faces a mix of dread, defiance, and weary resignation. Captain Hastings, standing by the door with his notebook, felt his heart pound. Poirot's trap had stirred the pot, and now the little Belgian was ready to lay bare the murderer's identity. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant and commanding. "We have reached the moment of truth. Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered, poisoned with digitalis, and the murderer is among us. The clues, the sugar bowl, the bitter taste, the dropped fork, the mysterious packet have led us to this point. Now, Hercule Poirot will reveal how and why this crime was committed." The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. Lady Beatrice clutched a handkerchief, a face pale. Mr. Roland Carver's sharp features were taut with anger, while Miss Eleanor Vance's cool demeanor showed cracks, her fingers frozen on her pearl bracelet. Mrs. Lavinia Gray sat rigid, her lips pursed. Peter Langley's cigarette burned low, his eyes narrowed. Dr. Seaman Caldwell stood calmly, his medical bag at his feet. "Let us begin with the crime," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "Sir Reginald collapsed at 8:10 p.m. during the toast. Lady Beatrice, you felt ill, tasting bitterness in your champagne, yet you survived. The sugar bowl contained digitalis, yet Sir Reginald took no coffee. How, then, was the poison delivered?" He paused, his green eyes sweeping the room. "The champagne, it is the obvious choice, but too obvious. All drank from the same bottle, poured by Thomas under Captain Mortimer's supervision. The glasses, they were untouched until the toast. No, the poison was not in the champagne." A murmur of surprise rippled through the group. Carver snapped. "Then where was it, Poirot? You're wasting our time." Poirot's smile was serene. "Patience, Monsieur Carver. Let us consider the sugar bowl. It was laced with digitalis, passed during coffee at 8:02 p.m. Lady Beatrice and Miss Vance took sugar, yet only Lady Beatrice felt ill. Why? Because the poison was not meant for her. It was a miscalculation." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "A miscalculation? You mean I was not the target?" "No, madame," Poirot said gently. "The target was Sir Reginald, but the poison, it was administered earlier, onto one portion, without detection. Sir Reginald's portion." Dr. Caldwell spoke, his voice steady. "But Mr. Poirot, the soufflé was prepared in the galley, served by Thomas. How could it be targeted so precisely?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A question most astute, Doctor. The answer lies in the moment before the soufflé was served. Thomas, you placed the plates before each guest, oui? But you were called away briefly to fetch more wine at 7:40 p.m. In that moment, the dining saloon was left unattended." Thomas nodded, his face pale. "Yes, sir, Captain Mortimer needed a bottle from the cellar. I was gone only a minute." "A minute," Poirot said, "is enough. Enough for someone to approach Sir Reginald's plate and sprinkle the poison." The guests exchanged wary glances. Miss Vance's voice was sharp. "That's impossible. We were all at the table, talking. Someone would have noticed." "Would they?" Poirot countered. "The room was lively, the conversation animated. And there was a distraction. Miss Vance, your fork fell at 8 p.m., drawing eyes away. But earlier at 7:40, another distraction occurred. Monsieur Carver, you spilled your wine, did you not?" Carver's face reddened. "A clumsy accident. It means nothing." "No," Poirot said, his tone firm. "It was no accident. The spilled wine drew attention, allowing the murderer to act. And the murderer, mes amis, is you, Monsieur Carver." The room erupted in gasps. Carver leaped to his feet, his voice shaking with rage. "This is outrageous. I had no reason to kill Sir Reginald. He was my client, my friend." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Your friend, oui, but also your downfall. Sir Reginald suspected you of embezzling funds from Harrow Industries. He confronted you, did he not, the week before this voyage? He threatened to expose you, to ruin you." Carver's mouth opened, but no words came. Poirot pressed on. "You saw an opportunity. The sugar bowl, it was a clever misdirection, laced with a small dose of digitalis to make Lady Beatrice ill, to cast suspicion elsewhere. But the true poison was in the soufflé, sprinkled during that brief moment when the saloon was unattended. You knew Sir Reginald's habits. He loved his desserts, and the soufflé was his favorite." Lady Beatrice sobbed, her voice breaking. "Roland, how could you? Reginald trusted you." Carver's face crumpled, his defiance crumbling. "It's not true. I didn't." But his voice faltered, and he sank back into his chair, his hands covering his face. Poirot continued, his voice steady. "The packet, seen by Madame Gray, was the digitalis you procured. You passed it to no one. It was for your own use." "But why make Beatrice ill?"
"To create chaos," Poirot said. "A second victim, even if only briefly ill, would muddy the waters. You underestimated the dose, Monsieur Carver, and Lady Beatrice survived. But Sir Reginald did not." Carver's shoulders shook, and a low moan escaped him. I had no choice. He was going to ruin me. Years of loyalty, and he turned on me over a few discrepancies." The room was silent, the weight of his confession settling over them. Mrs. Gray's eyes glistened with tears, while Langley stubbed out his cigarette, his face pale. Caldwell's expression was grim, and Miss Vance looked away, her composure shattered. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "The truth, mon ami. It is always there, waiting to be seen. The little grey cells, they do not fail." The clock struck 9 p.m., and the fog outside began to thin. As if mirroring the clarity Poirot had brought, the police launch would arrive soon. But the case was solved. The Sapphire Yacht's secrets had been laid bare, and justice would follow. The Reflection. The Sapphire Yacht, no longer cloaked in the suffocating fog, lay anchored under a clearing sky, the first stars piercing the twilight. The lounge where Hercule Poirot had just unmasked Mr. Roland Carver as Sir Reginald Harrow's murderer was steeped in a heavy silence. The guests, still reeling from the revelation, sat in stunned disbelief, their faces a tableau of shock, relief, and lingering unease. Captain Hastings, his notebook now closed, stood by the door, his heart still racing from the dramatic climax. Poirot, ever composed, adjusted his tie with precision, his green eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant, "the truth has been revealed. Monsieur Carver, driven by fear and greed, took the life of Sir Reginald Harrow. The poison, the misdirection, the lies, all have been laid bare by the little grey cells. Justice, it will now take its course." Lady Beatrice, her face streaked with tears, clutched her handkerchief. "Mr. Poirot, how can I thank you? Reginald, he trusted Roland, and to think—" Her voice broke, and she turned away, overcome. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, a stern demeanor softened by grief, spoke quietly. "You have done my brother justice, Mr. Poirot. I despised his choices, but he did not deserve this." Miss Eleanor Vance, a composure regained, nodded curtly.
For order. A crime, it disrupts the harmony of life. To restore it, that is my purpose. As the guests began to disperse, Captain Mortimer approached, his weathered face etched with relief. "The police launch is approaching, Mr. Poirot. They'll take Carver into custody. You've saved us from a terrible injustice." Poirot nodded, then turned to Hastings, gesturing for him to follow. They stepped onto the deck, where the cool night air carried the tang of salt and the promise of a new dawn. The stars glittered above, and the yacht's silhouette stood stark against the shimmering sea. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice reflective, "this case, it reminds us of the frailty of human nature. Greed, fear, betrayal. These are the shadows that lurk in even the most polished hearts. Monsieur Carver, he was a man of intellect, yet he succumbed to desperation." Hastings leaned against the railing, his mind still piecing together the puzzle. "It was brilliant, Poirot, the way you saw through the red herrings, the sugar bowl, the dropped fork, the vial in the galley. But how did you know it was the soufflé?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "The soufflé, mon ami. It was the only dish Sir Reginald consumed alone, with relish. The sugar bowl. It was a clever distraction, meant to confuse. But the timing, the brief absence of Thomas, the spilled wine, it pointed to a moment when the poison could be applied discreetly. Carver, he was positioned perfectly, near the sideboard, with motive and means." Hastings shook his head in admiration. "And Lady Beatrice's illness? That threw me completely. A miscalculation," Poirot said. "Carver added a small dose to the sugar bowl, hoping to cast suspicion elsewhere. He did not expect her to survive, but the dose was too weak. The true poison, it was in the soufflé, targeted only for Sir Reginald." They stood in silence for a moment, the gentle lapping of waves filling the air. Poirot's gaze turned to the horizon, where the police launch's lights were now visible. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a complex thing. It loves, it hates, it schemes. To understand it, one must listen, not only to words, but to silences." Hastings smiled. "You sound almost philosophical, old chap, but I suppose that's what makes you so dashed good at this." Poirot chuckled softly. "Philosophical, no, merely observant. The little grey cells, they see what others overlook. And now, mon ami, we shall leave the sapphire yacht to its fate. The police, they will handle the rest." As they turned to re-enter the lounge, the police launch drew alongside the darkness within. "Adieu, Sapphire." With that, he stepped onto the launch, Hastings at his side. The yacht receded into the night, its secrets laid bare, its harmony restored, at least for now.
As the launch cut through the water toward the shore, Hastings felt a familiar awe for his friend's genius. The case of the Sapphire yacht was closed, but Poirot's words lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between truth and deception. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The Sapphire yacht, now free from the oppressive fog, lay anchored under a sky streaked with the soft hues of dawn. The police launch had departed hours ago, taking Mr. Roland Carver into custody, his confession still echoing in the minds of those aboard. The guests, though relieved by the resolution, moved through the yacht's opulent corridors with a subdued air, as if the weight of the crime lingered like a shadow. Captain Hastings, standing on the deck, felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction as he watched the horizon, where the Isle of Wight was now faintly visible. Hercule Poirot, ever impeccable, joined him, his polished shoes gleaming in the morning light. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but clear. "The storm has passed, and the truth has been revealed. Yet I sense you are troubled. What occupies your thoughts?" Hastings sighed, his hands gripping the railing. "It's just the whole affair, Poirot. Carver seems so respectable, so loyal. To think he could betray Sir Reginald like that, it's unsettling." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. Even the most polished exterior can hide a motive dark and desperate. Monsieur Carver, he was driven by fear of ruin, a fear that overpowered his loyalty." The deck was quiet, save for the gentle creak of the yacht and the distant cry of a gull. The guests had gathered in the dining saloon for a sombre breakfast, their voices hushed. Lady Beatrice, still pale but composed, had taken charge as hostess, a grief tempered by a resolve to carry on. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, though still stern, seemed softened, her sharp tongue silenced by the weight of her brother's loss. Miss Eleanor Vance and Peter Langley sat apart, their earlier tensions replaced by a weary truce. Dr. Simon Caldwell, ever the professional, had offered to stay aboard until the yacht reached shore, his medical expertise a quiet comfort. Poirot and Hastings joined the group, the atmosphere heavy but no longer charged with suspicion. Lady Beatrice rose, her voice steady. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, we owe you a great debt. Without your charity, we might all have been lost in this tragedy." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, it is my duty to restore order where chaos reigns. Your husband, he was a man of greatness, and his memory deserves justice."
Others. "You've given us truth, Mr. Poirot, and for that I am grateful." Miss Vance, her pearl bracelet glinting, added, "I feared I'd be blamed, with all the talk of business and that wretched packet. You saw through it, Mr. Poirot, thank you." Langley, lighting a cigarette, nodded curtly. "I suppose I owe you one too. I didn't make things easy, but you got it right." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The truth? It is not always easy to find, but it is always there, waiting for the mind that seeks it." As breakfast concluded, Captain Mortimer approached, his weathered face etched with relief. "Mr. Poirot, the yacht will dock at Cowes by noon. The police have asked that everyone remain available for statements, but they're satisfied with your findings. Carver's confession sealed it." "Merci, Captain," Poirot replied. "And the crew? They are well?" "They are shaken, sir, but relieved. Thomas especially. He was worried he'd be blamed for the sugar bowl." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The steward? He is a good man, but easily overlooked. In this case, it was the guests who held the secrets." As the guests dispersed to prepare for disembarking, Poirot and Hastings returned to the deck. The sea sparkled under the rising sun, and the yacht's white hull gleamed like a promise of renewal. Hastings glanced at his friend, noting the quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "You know, Poirot," Hastings said, "I thought it might be Langley or even Miss Vance with all the red herrings, but you saw straight to Carver. How do you do it?" Poirot chuckled softly. "It is not magic, mon ami, but method. The little grey cells, they observe the contradictions, the spilled wine, the sugar bowl, the timing. Carver's motive, it was hidden, but his actions betrayed him. The soufflé, it was the perfect vehicle, and his distraction, it was too precise to be chance." Hastings shook his head in admiration. "Still, it's a grim business. Carver threw away everything, his career, his reputation, for a moment of desperation." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice reflective. "And that is the tragedy. The crime, it is not only against the victim, but against the soul of the perpetrator. Yet, we must move forward, Hastings. The world, it continues, and so must we." As the yacht's engines hummed to life, preparing to sail for Cowes, Poirot gazed at the horizon. "The sapphire yacht, it is a beautiful thing, but beauty, it can conceal darkness. Now it is cleansed, and we leave it to its future." Hastings smiled. "Until the next mystery, eh, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps, mon ami, but for now, let us enjoy the—"
Chapter 13. The Unseen Ripples. Squares old, the Sapphire yacht glided smoothly toward the harbor at Cowes, its engines humming a steady rhythm that contrasted with the turmoil of the past days. The morning sun bathed the deck in a golden glow, but the air carried a lingering chill, as if the shadow of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder had not entirely dissipated. Captain Hastings stood at the railing, his eyes fixed on the approaching shore, his mind replaying Hercule Poirot's masterful unraveling of the crime. Beside him, Poirot stood immaculate as ever, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes scanning the horizon with a contemplative air. "Mon ami," Poirot said, breaking the silence, "you are pensive. The case, it is solved, yet you seem to carry its weight. What troubles you?" Hastings sighed, his fingers tightening on the railing. "It's just the aftermath, Poirot. Carver's confession, the way it tore through everyone, it's left a mark. I keep thinking about Lady Beatrice, Mrs. Gray, even young Langley. They'll never see this yacht the same way again." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "Oui, Hastings, a crime, it leaves ripples like a stone cast into a pond. The guilty are punished, but the innocent, they bear scars. This is the nature of human tragedy." Below deck, the guests were preparing to disembark, their movements slow and subdued. Lady Beatrice, now dressed in a simple grey frock, was packing her belongings with the help of the maid, her face a mask of quiet resolve. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, though still stern, had softened in her interactions, offering a rare word of comfort to her sister-in-law. Miss Eleanor Vance, her business acumen unshaken, was already making arrangements to meet with Harrow Industries Board, determined to protect her investment. Peter Langley, his boyish charm dimmed, smoked in silence, grappling with the reality of his uncle's betrayal by a trusted confidant. Dr. Simon Caldwell, ever the professional, checked on the crew, ensuring their well-being before the yacht reached shore. Poirot and Hastings descended to the dining saloon, where Captain Mortimer had gathered the guests for a final briefing. The room, once the scene of Sir Reginald's fatal collapse, now felt hollow, its opulence overshadowed by memory. Mortimer stood at the head of the table, his weathered face etched with fatigue, but also gratitude. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," Mortimer began, "the police have confirmed that Carver will face trial in London. Your work here has been extraordinary. The crew and I are in your debt." Poirot inclined his head. "It is my duty, Captain, to bring order where chaos reigns. The Sapphire yacht, it is a fine vessel, and it will sail again, free from this shadow." Lady Beatrice spoke,
her voice steady but soft. "Mr. Poirot, yacht, I think. It holds too many memories." Mrs. Gray nodded, a rare gesture of agreement. "A wise decision, Beatrice. Let it be a fresh start for all of us." Miss Vance, her pearl bracelet glinting, added, "I'll ensure Harrow Industries honors Reginald's legacy. His vision was sound, even if his trust was misplaced." Langley stubbed out his cigarette, his voice low. "I'll take over where he left off, Mr. Poirot. I owe him that much. Carver's betrayal won't define us." Caldwell, standing by the sideboard, spoke last. "I've seen many deaths, Mr. Poirot, but this one, it's a reminder of how fragile trust can be. Your clarity brought us through." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Trust, it is indeed fragile, Doctor, but the truth, it is unyielding. Each of you has faced this tragedy, and each will carry it forward in your own way." As the guests dispersed to finalize their preparations, Poirot and Hastings returned to the deck. The harbor was now in clear view, bustling with activity as the yacht approached. Hastings glanced at his friend, noting the quiet intensity in his expression. "You know, Poirot," Hastings said, "this case felt different. It wasn't just about solving the crime, it was about understanding these people, their pain, their secrets." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the shore. "Oui, mon ami. A detective, he does not only solve crimes, he listens to the human heart. The ripples of this murder, they will spread, but they will also fade. Life, it continues." Hastings smiled. "You're a philosopher at heart, aren't you? Always seeing the bigger picture." Poirot chuckled softly. "A philosopher? No, merely a man who values order. The little gray cells, they see the details, but they also see the whole. And now, Hastings, we shall leave this yacht and its ripples behind." As the Sapphire yacht docked at Cowes, the guests disembarked, each stepping onto the shore with a mixture of relief and resolve. The police were waiting, their questions brief now that Carver's confession had clarified the case. Poirot and Hastings lingered a moment longer, watching as the yacht's crew began to prepare for its next journey. "The Sapphire," Poirot murmured. "It will sail again, but it will never forget. Nor shall we, mon ami." With that, they turned and walked down the gangway, leaving the yacht to its future. The case was closed, but its echoes would linger, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the genius of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 14. The Departure. The Sapphire yacht, now docked at the bustling harbor of Cowes, seemed almost serene in the bright midday sun, its white hull gleaming against the azure water. The scars of the recent tragedy, though, scurry about with practiced efficiency. Beside him, Hercule Poirot adjusted his hat, his green eyes scanning the scene with a quiet intensity, as if ensuring no detail had been overlooked. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice carrying the calm assurance of a man who had restored order. "The case is closed, the truth revealed. Yet I sense you are reluctant to leave this place. Why is that?" Hastings sighed, his gaze lingering on the yacht. "It's hard to explain, Poirot. The Sapphire was so grand, so full of life, and then murder. It's like a stain that won't wash out. I keep thinking about Lady Beatrice, Mrs. Gray, all of them, how they'll carry this with them." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching slightly. "We, Hastings, the ripples of a crime, they do not vanish quickly. But life, it is resilient. These people, they will heal, as will the Sapphire, in time." The guests were making their final farewells on the dock. Lady Beatrice, her grey frock replaced by a tailored coat, stood with Captain Mortimer,
discussing the yacht's sail. Her face, though still pale, bore a determined resolve, as if she were ready to forge a new path. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, her black dress stark against the vibrant harbour, offered a rare nod of gratitude to Poirot as she passed, her stern demeanour softened by the ordeal's end. Miss Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, was already on her telephone, arranging meetings with Harrow Industries board. Peter Langley, his suitcase slung over his shoulder, lit a cigarette and gave Poirot a curt wave, his boyish charm tempered by a newfound gravity. Dr. Simon Caldwell, ever the professional, lingered to speak with the police, ensuring all medical details were clear. Poirot and Hastings approached Lady Beatrice, who turned to them with a faint smile. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, I cannot thank you enough. You've given me clarity, if not peace. I'll return to London and start anew. The sapphire, it's too much a reminder of Reginald." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, you are strong, and strength. It carries one through grief. The sapphire, it will find a new master, and you, a new purpose." Mrs. Gray joined them, her voice quieter than before. "Mr. Poirot, I misjudged you. Your methods, they seemed theatrical, but they brought justice. Reginald would have approved." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, the theatrical, it is merely a tool. The truth, it is the goal. Your brother, he—"
Poirot, for keeping the spotlight off me. Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Langley, ambition is a fine thing, but let it be guided by honor." Caldwell was the last to approach, his medical bag slung over his shoulder. "Mr. Poirot, your insight into the poison was remarkable. I've learned something about observation from you." Poirot smiled. "Doctor, the body speaks, but the mind listens. You too have served well." As the guests boarded a waiting motor car to take them to the train station, Captain Mortimer saluted Poirot and Hastings. "Gentlemen, the crew owes you a debt. The Sapphire will sail again, cleaner for your work." "Merci, Captain," Poirot said. "May her voyages be free of such shadows." The motor car pulled away, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone on the dock. The Sapphire yacht loomed behind them, its elegance undimmed, but its story forever altered. Hastings glanced at his friend, noting the quiet satisfaction in his posture. "You know, Poirot," Hastings said, "this case felt like a chess game. Every move calculated, every piece crucial. You played it masterfully." Poirot chuckled softly. "A chess game, oui, but with human hearts as pieces. The murderer, he thought himself a grand master, but Hercule Poirot, he sees the board clearly." They turned to board their own transport, a sleek car arranged to take them to Southampton for the train to London. As they settled into the seats, Hastings asked, "What's next, old chap? Another mystery, I suppose?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Perhaps, mon ami. The world, it is full of disorder, and where there is disorder, Poirot is needed. But for now, let us enjoy the journey home. The little grey cells, they have earned a moment of repose." The car sped along the coastal road, the Sapphire yacht receding into the distance. Its secrets had been unraveled, its justice served, but its story would linger in the minds of those who had sailed upon it. For Poirot and Hastings, it was another chapter closed, but the book of their adventures was far from finished. Chapter 15. The Final Horizon. The train from Southampton to London rattled along the tracks, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of the past days aboard the Sapphire yacht. Captain Hastings sat by the window, watching the rolling English countryside blur past, his mind still tethered to the gleaming yacht and the dark drama that had unfolded upon it. Beside him, Hercule Poirot sat immaculate, his hands folded neatly in his lap, his green eyes fixed on a point beyond the horizon, as if seeing truths invisible to others. The case was solved, the murderer apprehended, but the echoes of the Sapphire's secrets.
Murder. It's the people. Lady Beatrice, trying to start over. Mrs. Grey, softening after all her bitterness. Langley, stepping into his uncle's shoes. It's like the yacht was a little world, and we saw it crack open. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. Lee Hastings, a world in miniature, with all its passions and frailties. A crime, it is like a mirror. It reflects the truth of those within its orbit. And we are the ones who hold the mirror steady. The train compartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of conversation from other passengers. Hastings leaned back, his notebook tucked away, its pages filled with the details of the case, the sugar bowl, the dropped fork, the poisoned souffle, and Roland Carver's desperate betrayal. You know, he said, I thought for a moment it might be Miss Vance with her business dealings, or even Langley with his inheritance. But you saw through it all, Poirot. That souffle trick, devilishly clever. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The souffle, mon ami, it was the perfect vehicle. Light, delicate, unsuspected. Carver, he knew Sir Reginald's love for it, and he seized the moment of distraction. The sugar bowl, the bitter champagne, these were his attempts to muddy the waters. But the little grey cells, they see clearly. Hastings chuckled. You and your grey cells. I'll never understand how you piece it all together. The glances, the timings, the motives. It's like magic. No, not magic, Poirot corrected, his tone gentle but firm. Method. The mind. It observes, it connects, it reasons. The human heart, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures. A trembling hand, a fleeting look, a word unspoken. These are the threads that weave the truth. The train slowed as it approached a small station, the platform bustling with passengers. Hastings glanced out, noting the normalcy of the scene, so different from the gilded cage of the Sapphire yacht. What do you think will happen to them now? He asked. Lady Beatrice, the others, will they find peace? Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. Peace, it is elusive, Hastings. Lady Beatrice, she will rebuild, for she has courage. Madame Grey, she will carry her grief, but it will soften her heart. Mademoiselle Vance, her ambition will drive her forward, and Monsieur Langley, he will learn to lead, or he will falter. As for the Sapphire, it will sail under new hands, its story a whisper in its timbers. Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the yacht's elegant decks, now empty of its tragic cast. And Carver? What drives a man to such a point, betraying a friend, risking everything? Fear, Poirot said simply. Fear of ruin, of shame. Monsieur Carver, he was a man of movements. Precise. This case, Hastings, it reminds us that truth, it is not only for justice, but for healing. The Sapphire passengers, they will carry their scars, but they will also carry the clarity we have given them. Hastings smiled. You're a bit of a healer yourself, Poirot, in your own way. Not just solving crimes, but setting things right. Poirot's chuckle was soft. A healer? No, merely a seeker of order. The world, it is full of chaos, and Hercule Poirot, he brings balance. But now, mon ami, let us look to London. A good dinner, a warm fire, these are the rewards of a case well solved. As the countryside gave way to the outskirts of the city, Hastings felt a sense of closure. The Sapphire yacht, with its opulence and its tragedy,
was behind them. The case had tested Poirot's genius and revealed the fragility of human trust, but it had also reaffirmed the power of truth. The train pulled into Waterloo Station, and Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the platform, ready to return to their familiar world. "Until the next mystery, eh, Poirot?" Hastings said, his tone light. Poirot's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Oui, Hastings. The world, it will not stay orderly for long, but for now, let us enjoy the calm." They walked into the bustle of London, the sapphire yacht a memory, its secrets laid bare by the relentless logic of Hercule Poirot. The case was closed, and the horizon, for now, was clear.